All right, guys, I think that we are pretty much ready and set to start. It is, I guess, 5:02 o'clock. So let's keep going, I guess. Greetings, everyone. One more time. I'm glad. Oh, we've got a question. How could I see it? Have a QA button.
Yes, Alexander, we have a question. Vitaly is asking, I'm joining it the first time. Is there any record to the previous parts?
Yes, the record is available. So let me just start. I will share all the required links and things like that. So anyway, first of all, greetings everyone. I hope that you can see my screen. Please let me know if it is so or not. I'm glad to see you joining our second session dedicated fully to Flutter. And today we are going to continue expanding our Flutter knowledge. And before we start, I would like to ask a couple of pretty much traditional questions. Have you guys completed all of the required prerequisites for today's session? I mean, setting up your IDE, installing Dart, installing Flutter, things like that. Have you completed all of these steps? Because these steps would be crucial for our practical tasks for today. And if this is not the case for you, let me share all of the necessary links in chat. So let me just do this. I hope that you can see it. So basically, let's make a quick rundown of these links. So I hope you can see it in my screen. So first of all, feel free to join our Telegram channel in order to get all of the latest updates and for sure post your feedback regarding our events. Then if you have not done it yet, you can quickly walk through this 3-step guide in order to install Flutter and set up all of the required prerequisites in order to be able to work together with us today on our practical task. Additionally to that, feel free to refer to the recording of the previous event where you will be able to navigate this event at your own pace via time codes and other goodies. And another thing I would like to tell you is that here goes the link for presentation for today's event. So again, just for your convenience, and the GitHub repo that we are going to talk about a little bit later. So this is it. And I think we can simply start. So basically, let me give you a little bit of overview of the event we are going to make today. So in my opinion, previous workshop was a little bit challenging and overwhelming, especially for Flutter newcomers, because we've got a lot of concepts, a lot of new things to learn. And that is the reason why we decided to shift our focus from broader set of topics to some narrow focused events. And that's why today we are going to put all of our efforts into solution for one particular problem, which is adding persistent storage to your Flutter application. And before doing that, let me kindly introduce myself. Right. So my name is Brinch Alexander. I am working as a senior UI developer at Grid Dynamics. For almost the entirety of my career, I've been working with single-page applications written in Angular and or React, as well as teaching people fundamentals of web. And I would like to start our event with a little sort of survey. So I would like you to share your feedback and your current achievements and your kind of Flutter engagement currently. So basically the question is, how's your Flutter going? And more accurately, have you read some articles about Flutter or maybe watched some tutorial videos from the time of our previous event, feel free to just post plus sign as a sign of agreement in chat, so I will see it. Okay, we've got 1 plus, 2 more pluses, cool. Oh, wow. Nice, cool, cool. And so, yeah, sounds good to me. And the next question is intended for maybe for some of you who decided to go a little bit even beyond, and maybe have you even made your first application in Flutter? At least something, at least some for domestic usage only, let's say that. Okay, okay. Not a lot of pluses. Yeah, okay. Anyway, that's cool. And the last question I would like to ask you is, do you still have a willing to learn Flutter? So are you ready to go on your journey to learn something new, something interesting? Okay, nice, nice, cool. I like it. Thanks, guys, thanks. Okay, cool. So on the next step, I would like to actually give you a little refresher regarding the things that we have been working on over the course of previous session. And we've been working together with you on a simple application, which purpose was to expand its user active vocabulary. And before going forward, let's review what this term actually means. And so basically, this term is related to language learning experience, and every foreign language learner has its own so-called passive vocabulary, which is a set of words which are known to the user, but he is not able to use them fluently and freely in his daily speech. And opposite to that, there is another set of words, which is called active vocabulary, which is actually the same, but on top of that, you are able to use them regularly and fluently. And an objective of every language learner is to expand its set of active vocabulary as quick as possible, so as to expand your vocabulary, to make your speech sound more natural and fancier, and other cool stuff. And this application barely looked like this. It consisted only of 2 screens. So the first one, a screen called Dictionary, which is responsible for filling our dictionary, which is a set of words we are going to practice using. It's a pretty simple screen. It allows you to only do 2 things. Just enter some new words. I hope you can see my pointer. Cool. Just enter new words and browse the list of words that you already added. And this is it. And the second screen was intended purely for practicing usage of your words. So this is the same list of words, but here near each word you have a corresponding track button, which allows you to manually track usage of some words and their respective usage count. And that was it, basically. And over the course of this work, we've been working on discovering the certain set of topics. There were 4 of them, and the first one was components, which allowed us to build our UI as a set of isolated and self-contained kind of units, which we could compose and use as a form of some widget tree. Later, we've discovered some solutions for styling in order to be able to make our components look fancier. Then we introduced even more complexity to our application, and that's why we've had to discover the ways to organize routing into our application across multiple pages. And then we finished with setting up our shared state management in order to make our pages work with some pieces, with some shared pieces of data, which was actually a list of our words from dictionary. And this is basically the point where we need to stop talking about mockups and let's try to launch some application actually. And let me just try to do this. I hope you guys can see my IDE and you can see my application running. Just give it some time to spin up. Let's take a look on how it goes. It should go well, if I'm not mistaken. And by the way, I'm using VS Code, and Flutter plugin for VS Code is pretty handy, and it supports a lot of features. I like it really. Works good for me. So I think we've done, and let's switch over to the application. So here's the list of our words for practice. It is empty for now, and let's try to actually fill it with some words. Let's go to dictionary and add some fancy words to practice. For instance, should turn word like that, which means pretty quiet person, like that quiet. And let's go to our list of words for today. And we've got our first word, which we can track its frequency of usage just by tapping on the corresponding card. And this is basically it. It works and it looks more or less fine. However, one issue there which we've left unsolved. And let me try to demonstrate this issue. So what we need to do actually is just to simply quit our application and try to launch it again, just like this. As you can see here, I've got no words saved. So my taciturn along with all the usage statistic has just disappeared, and we've lost all of our data. And the reason for this is that we have not yet covered our opportunities to use some persistent storage for our application data, because before that, we stored everything just in memory within our data model without caring about some sort of persistent storage. And that is the reason why our data lives only as long as our application is running. And this is the problem we are going to solve today over the course of today's event. I hope you are excited on the same level as I am. And then let's go back to our presentation. Let me simply quit my emulator. Cool, right. So let's keep going. So plan for today is pretty straightforward, yet a little bit different from the one that we had previously. Today we are going to cover specifically 3 sections, and each section will be devoted to some topic related to a problem we are trying to solve, which is data persistence. At the end of each section, we are going to conduct a really short and fast quiz among the audience, just in order to make sure that all of the fresh concepts have landed into your head really gracefully and good. And at the end of this workshop, we are going to conduct a small sort of get-together. We are going to work in a follow-along coding session where we are going to implement all of the covered concepts and integrate persistent data storage into our existing application just in real time, together, me and you. And this is the plan for today. And just yet another reminder, this is the repository we are going to use for today as a basis for our application and for our follow-along coding session. So let me simply post it one more time. So here it goes. I hope you can see it. If you have not done it yet, please clone this repo. We are going to use it. Cool. Let's move forward with this. At this point, guys, do you have any questions regarding how we are going to work today, regarding any prerequisites, links, things like that? Oh God, I'm sharing not a full presentation, sorry. So guys, are we ready to move on? I'm just looking into chat. Okay, I guess it means that we are ready. Cool. And now we are ready to actually observe the list of topics we have to tackle in order to resolve this issue of data persistence in our application. The first topic we are going to cover is future, which is basically a name for a special data structure which exists in Dart, and it represents a core unit of any asynchronous activity in Dart. And it will be essential for us to understand what it is actually and how to work with that. Later, we are going to cover most of the available persistent storage options for our application, and we will try to learn how to apply a proper storage to appropriate situation. And as a final piece of the puzzle, we will have to figure out how to perform the integration itself between our persistent storage and our existing tree of application widgets in Flutter. And this is it. And we are pretty much set to start right now, right off the bat, from the first topic, which is future. And in order to understand what future is, let's try to refer to the following example. So the good question is, what actually future represents? Like, how can I understand which piece of data future represents? And the answer is that future means some piece of data which will be available not immediately, but eventually, someday in future, who knows when. And the thing is that most of the time, when we work with future or with any asynchronous activity, which is here, for instance, our activity which we are working on is HTTP request. As you can see in this example, let me turn on my pointer. We are trying to perform HTTP GET request to some endpoint in order to probably fetch some persons, I guess. And this is the thing. Basically, result of this request is representable by future. And most of the time, we care not about the procedure itself, but about some potential result of this procedure. So we, as a developer, want to handle success of this request, for instance, just in order to do something with our persons later. And we can do this. And in order to achieve this, we need to assign a proper callbacks to our future to call its proper methods. And in order to handle success of any synchronous operation hiding behind future, we have to use then method and provide a callback, which is going to be executed in case of successful future resolution or just success of the corresponding future operation. However, besides that, we know that async operations are not protected from failure at all. So as you already know, that such a synchronous activity as an HTTP request is not there is no guarantee that it will be finished successfully. So like we can hit any possible HTTP error as a response, or we might feel some connectivity issues during our request. And that is the occasion where we need to handle explicitly some error occurred during this synchronous request. And we have an API for this as well. This method called catchError, where we, in the same fashion, should provide some callback, which will be executed in case of failure of the underlying asynchronous operation. An important thing to notice here is that futures are chainable, which means that each method of the future API, such as then or catchError, returns future as well, which means that by doing so, we can build some sort of pipelines for creating some multi-layered handling logic of our asynchronous operations. And here I would like to step back for a little and just ask an audience a small question. Have you guys started to see some familiar faces in this API, in this structure, in this logic? Have you seen anything like this before in other languages? Yeah, you are pretty close to the true. That's correct. Yeah. Actually, the answer is promise, because basically future is just a Dart answer for plain JavaScript promises, and it features exact the same API. And even if I'm not mistaken, it even works in exact the same fashion in terms of event loop. So it also schedules micro tasks and things like that, which we don't really care about for now, but it's just good to know. However, there are multiple. Okay, we've got a question. Sure. Let me just go back to it in a couple of minutes. Okay, cool. So the thing is that nevertheless, there are a couple of differences with future. And let's take a look at difference number one. The thing is that future built-in API is a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more feature-rich, I would say. So let's take a look at this example to get some details. So as you can see here, I've defined some complicated future without any then or catch blocks, but with some other methods. And as you can see here, I've got a timeout method, which allows me to define some timeout handling logic for future, which means that if this future fails to be resolved or rejected over the course of given timeout, some arbitrary callback will be executed instead. So just a fancy thing. And another method is called whenComplete, which basically belongs to the same family of methods such as catch-error and then, but it is going to be executed disregards the state of future. So it will be executed in both of the cases, on failure of the underlying asynchronous operation and on success. So if you think about it as about try-catch equivalent, it will serve the same purpose as finally block in just imperative error handling, things like that. And another built-in API goodie is future delayed constructor, which allows you out of the box to build a delayed future, which will be executed sometime after. As you can see, as we define duration here via built-in duration object. And this is not actually it with all of the future API things. I strongly encourage you to visit the corresponding reference links, which will be included in the end of this presentation. But we are going to move on. And another difference is, do you guys remember how can we create our own promise in JavaScript? Just in short words, what should we use? Yeah, plus is cool, but plus is not enough. Just leave me a little bit of comments, just at least 3 or 2 words. What should we use? Yeah, kinda, yeah. Well, it's also possible. Yeah, cool. So yeah, basically we need to use promise constructor, pass a function inside, a function in turn accepts 2 callbacks and do all of this callback drama, things like that. The short answer is that it is not possible with future. There is no intended way like this to build future out of this API. And for this reason, we have to use a completely different object, which is called completer. I don't know about you guys, but I remember exact the same API in Angular JS. By saying JS, I mean really that old Angular from dinosaurs era. And the thing is that what actually do we need to do in order to, where is my pointer? Okay, cool. So first of all, you need to create your own completer object. And this completer object features a couple of methods which you can use later from your callback style API in order to indicate future completion, I mean resolution, or failure with error. And for this purpose, you can use respectively methods called complete to indicate promise resolution, future resolution, and complete error to indicate future error. And you have to return explicitly future from your method. And this is how it's going to work. We won't use this API today, but I just want to let you know in order not to be confused when you will try to solve the similar problem in your application. And talking about future, it is impossible to also not to mention a sqlite syntax, which is primarily intended to work with futures. And I think at that sense, it works more or less the same as in JavaScript. We have to define our function as asynchronous by using async keyword right in the end of our function signature. And afterwards, we are able to work with a wait keyword within our function. What the wait allows you to do, it allows you to wait for promise. And so as you can guess, here on this line, we are going to get a list of persons right in our persons variable, just because we use a wait here, which basically means wait for some future resolution and return the result of this resolution. And as you can see here, as usual, we have to use some imperative try-catch constructions in order to handle errors and do some finalization. So basically exact the same thing as we have in TypeScript, JavaScript, and other JS compiled flavors. And this is it with future, and we've come just now to our first quiz dedicated to the topic. So quiz is pretty simple, and the first thing is, how can you describe future in just one sentence? So let's practice it, guys. I am looking at the chat. And I'm waiting for your responses. Yes, promise. No, I think it's too simple. I think away from JS. Well, it sounds good to me anyway. Because I think anyway you understand the fundamental concept behind future, that future is just result of some asynchronous operation which will be available not immediately because it's, asynchronous, but it will be available eventually someday in future, and it can either fail or complete successfully. That is the thing. Okay, cool. Let's move further. So the next question, how should I handle successful future resolution? Basically, answer consists of only one word. Or maybe two. Await, right, acceptable. And then, basically, if you like to work with a callback style API for some reason, that is fine completely. Cool. The next thing is how should handle future failure. And I think you know answer for this as well. Since as far as I can see, you've pretty much experienced with promises. Catch, right. That's good. Cool. And the last question is a little bit tricky one. What is the return type of an async function? And by async function, I mean function marked with this async keyword. Future, that is correct. Async function is obliged to return future. However, the wrapping inside future happens implicitly. And I think I didn't put enough attention to this. As you can see in this example, I return a list of persons, but anyway, it will be wrapped implicitly by future. So as a result, I'm going to return actually future, which is result with list of persons. That is right. Thanks. Good. And we've done with the future. Thanks everyone for your participation. And let's move forward to actually observing any persistent storage option that we might use for today. So it is the thing, persistent storage options. And the first option comes pretty obvious, but it might be sometimes really overseen. And the option that I'm talking about is Dart.io, which is built-in Dart library for facilitating any input-output operations. So we've got a lot of input-output operations, including working with files, which is basically can be used as some fundament of our storage solution. And as you can see in this example, we are freely able to create new files using just Dart.io structures and classes. We are able to read file contents by using reader string, for instance, and we're also able to write some content to our files. The only question we need to solve while we work with Dart.io, with files, is that we have to find a proper destination for our files, because every native operating system imposes its own restrictions regarding where our application files should live. And luckily, there is an abstraction which we can use. This is a package called Path Provider. You can see it right here. And this package has already solved this problem, and we can use its method called getApplicationDocuments-Directory in order to get some platform-independent solution to always get the proper path for our files. And as you can see, we are able to use this path in our file directories. And this is it with Dart.io. It is pretty low level, but it is always available for you. And there are some important considerations for you to take into account. The next option I would like to cover is so-called shared preferences. And this storage is pretty special, not only because of its API and additionally to that, because of its primary use case. Let's take a look at this. So the thing is that shared preferences is intended to store a small pieces of information, and at its core, it acts just as a key value storage. As you can see in this example, it features really small set of methods. You can only set some arbitrary value to some key, as you can see here, where I'm putting some authentication token into a auth token. And at the same time, you can remove some value by some key just to clear up your storage. Even though this API looks simpler, anyway, the storage is asynchronous. As you can see here, we have to do some await stuff in order to get our shared preferences instance. So besides this API, we should also mind the following limitations of this storage option. As I've said before, it is not designed for holding a lot of data. So probably it is more tailored towards just a simple key value storage for some cookies, session IDs, or other security related things. And in terms of data types, it is only capable of storing some primitive values such as strings, integers, double, Boolean values, and a list composed of strings only. And this is it with shared preferences. Just keep it in mind for future. And the main option we are going to cover today is yet another third-party package called sqlite. And this package allows us to work with full-fledged SQLite database instance right from our Flutter application. And let's take a look at that. So since we are working with the SQL database, the process will be a little bit more complicated because at least we need to set up our database initially. And this is the example of how can we do that. So we can use open database method, which is going to be responsible for database initialization logic. And it, as you can see here, it requires for sure some file path because we need to store a file for our database somewhere. And we need to define some logic for creating of our database. And usually the thing that we would like to do here is to execute some SQL, which will set up our database schema. As in this example, we've set up some person table with ID and name and age and things like that. However, It is a pretty common scenario when your database schema is really prone to frequent changes, especially on a startup phase of your project, which means that you have to handle these changes somehow. And unfortunately, neither Flutter nor sqlite offers you some fancy and automatic way to handle so-called data migrations. And the thing is, we have to handle this manually. So as you can see here in this example, along with all of the database configuration, we can provide a version argument, which indicates a number of versions of our database. And the later we will have to define our own upgrade logic inside onUpgrade callback, where we have to manually handle all of the version jumps between new version and old one, which is tedious, error-prone, and not really convenient to do, but unfortunately, this is the only option we have for now, if I'm not mistaken. But let's forget about this for a moment and let's go to some examples of data manipulation. So it is possible for sure to query some data from the database using method called query. And as you can see here, we have to tackle yet another problem on our own. And the problem is that our query is going to return some map, which is not exactly the domain structure we are working on in scope of our application, which means that we also have to take care about conversion between this map, which is kind of machine-friendly format, into objects of our domain area, which is, in this example, is person instance. So please be aware of this as well. And besides that, we are able also to insert some new data to our database. It works pretty simple. We can just use insert method, provide table name that we would like to update, and just a map of values we would like to insert. And this is it with working with sqlite. And another option, and the last one, is not exactly about persistent storage, but anyway, it can be used like this. And this option is HTTP package, because no one can prohibit us from interacting with some cloud storage or some backend service via HTTP protocol, and therefore work with backend or cloud service as a database or some server storage, things like that. Let's take a look at a quick example of its usage. So here how it looks like, nothing fancy here, nothing exciting really. We just have to call the corresponding method of HTTP object in order to launch request that we would like to launch. And I would like you to pay attention to this piece, because you should think about Dart HTTP as about more like window.fetch instead of some high-level alternative such as Axios or things like that, because as you can see here, this thing is pretty low level. You have to care a lot about all of the required headers, as well as you have to properly handle all of the errors. So for instance, here I've had to manually handle all of the requests with response code such as 200 as a successful one and throw exceptions otherwise. That is just yet another consideration to be aware of. And this is it with our storage options, and let's try to warm up in our short quiz dedicated to that. And now we are going to find the right storage for some particular situation. Okay, cool. So the first situation I would like to present to you is our dictionary words. So which kind of storage among the presented ones you would like to use for this data? What do you guys think? I'm looking at the chat. Share it. Let's wait for a couple of more options. Maybe maybe one more. Yeah, okay, this point about HTTP makes sense. Share it. Well, yeah, okay, I got you guys. So the thing is that unfortunately, in our particular use case, shared preference will not work, because let's take a look one more time on the limitations in terms of data which we can hold within shared preferences. And so as you remember, we can store only some primitive things, and on top of that, we can store some list of strings. And this is basically it. So the problem is that unfortunately our Word objects are a little bit more complicated. I hope you can see my screen right now. It's my IDE. And here is the structure of our Word object. And as you can see here, it features some domain methods as well as some information. So basically our Word consists of some ID, which we use to identify word among the others. It features some text attribute as well as usage count of this word. So now taking into account that our word represents this complicated structure, which storage you find most appropriate for this? I hope it has made things a little bit more clear. Yeah, correct. So we've got some pieces of data, they are complicated, and we have to set up some kind of, well, yes, you can. Well, yeah, it's undeniable. We can do that. Okay, but cool. Thanks for this anyway. Right. So intended answer was sqlite. Let's move to the next thing. So we've done with the storage for our words. And the next task for you is authentication token. Where would you like to place it? Shared preferences, HTTP. Yeah, I suppose that this is the right use case for shared preferences. Yeah, and later we will be able to put this value into our header if we want to send it in HTTP request, for instance. Yeah, this is correct. I like it. And the last question is a little bit tricky. So we are going to store objects with loosely defined structure. What I'm saying is that let's imagine that we have some objects with really violent structure, which I mean changes like from day to day, like adding new fields, removing old ones, things like that. So there are certain complications in this particular use case. Can you guys advise me how to do it? Which kind of storage should I use in this case? Well, it might be sqlite, but the thing is that because of this requirement for volatile object structure, we will have to deal a lot with schema changes. And this thing, in my opinion, makes sqlite appliance, yeah, like we should seek for something like NoSQL. So like, yeah, this question was a little bit open-ended just to allow you to think a little bit outside of the box. Yeah, so basically that was the intention. So yeah, we can probably go here with SQL or things like that. Okay, cool. And we've done it. This is it with persistent storage. Yeah, this is correct notice about SQL. Yeah, cool. Thank you, Vadim. Yeah, up to this point, we go to actually the final piece of this puzzle we are trying to solve today. Now we need to bring together kind of two completely different dimensions, some persistent storage and the tree of our widgets, just to allow our widgets to use, or our application model to use data from our persistent storage, right? And the answer is provider to the rescue. do you guys remember the primary intention of provider package? Do you guys remember it from previous session? I would like to hear your answers. State management, setting context. Cool, that is correct. Like, most important thing about provider is that it was built by nature to expose some arbitrary value to your widgets tree. And then, if I'm not mistaken, they allow to also use these guys kind of as a base for application state management. Yeah, this is correct. But for now, we should care about not the state management, but about this feature of exposing some value to the widget tree. And the thing is that provider package features a lot of so-called providers, and each particular provider allows us to expose some particular data structure, instance of some particular data structure to our widgets tree. And we should always so-called mind our own provider. So we should always use right provider for right piece of data. And that is the reason why we have such classes as future provider, just for cases where we need to provide a future result to our widgets tree. Or at the same time, we have change notifier provider, where we need to set up this, which was already mentioned, state management, and therefore we need to expose change notifier to our tree. However, there are two more providers which we are going to take a closer look at today. These providers are proxy provider and multi-provider. They are going to help us to perform this mentioned integration. And let's take a look at multi-provider first. So multi-provider really features nothing fancy. It is a simply convenience tool for providing multiple providers into your application. So if you remember, currently in our app, we are having only one provider. Let me open it up. So it looks like this. Oh no, that's wrong branch, sorry. Let me open it again. Yeah, here it goes. So in our application, we only have one provider for our application state management, and this is fine. However, life goes on and our application might grow in complexity, and it will be insanely difficult to maintain everything inside one provider. And this is the reason why with the time flow, we have to introduce eventually multiple providers. And this is the intention of multi-provider provider. It accepts, as you can see, two arguments: child, which is just the child widget tree, and list of providers in a form of array, where we can define as many providers as we would like. As you can see in this particular example, we've defined some provider for storage and yet another provider for network interaction, for instance. However, besides that, we are also interested in making some sort of dependencies between providers. So let's imagine that you have some tricky provider which should be constructed based on value provided by other provider. It sounds tricky, but there is a solution for this as well. And this solution is called proxy provider. And to understand this better, let's take a look at this example. As you can see here, we've got two providers. Again, we've got some storage service as well as some storage configuration. And we know for sure that storage service depends on configuration, which is pretty common use case because storage can depend on a lot of things, such as environment variables, some API credentials, I don't know, authentication tokens, things like that, some discovery services. This list can go even beyond. And here's the use case, and here how we are going to solve it. So one of the providers will be exposed regularly, which is independent one, which is storage config, which is going to be exposed via a regular provider. But then we are going to use proxy provider, which is intended to be used in this special case where you need to build new provider on top of some existing provider. And it accepts two methods. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it accepts two methods. First one is create, which is responsible for initial instantiation of our service we are trying to build. As you can see here, usually we place here only just a constructor call for our storage service. Additionally to that, there is an update method, which will be called each time some of the dependencies of this proxy provider will be updated. And this is the place where we have to provide this sort of bridge between dependent and independent service. And this is the place where we can perform an injection of storage config into storage service. And this is exactly the thing how we're going to work today during our integration. The last thing I would like to mention is that as usual, we should use the right provider for right data structure we are going to expose. And the thing is that we would probably expose our change notifier. Let me show it once again. We are going to expose our, so here's our words provider, which is not this again. Let me show it one more time. So this is our words provider, which is change notifier, which serves as a root state manager for our application. And basically how our integration will work, we are going to inject our persistent storage right here, and we are going to track all of the corresponding changes inside persistent storage as well. And so the reason why I'm talking about this is that we need to expose out of our proxy provider change notifier. And this is the reason why, for this purpose, we have to use surprise change notifier proxy provider, which totally makes sense because it is a proxy provider, because it is a provider based on top of some other provider, and it is a change notifier because actually we are going to expose the change notifier via this provider. It might sound confusing, but it will for sure be clear over the practice. And this is it with the topic of integration of our storage for today. And we've got our last final quiz regarding the topic, which consists of only 2 questions. Which provider should I use to declare several providers in my Flutter application? Multi-provider, right, good. And the final one, which provider should I use to declare provider based on a value from some other provider? Proxy, right. Well, the right answer, it depends. If you want to expose some plain value, you should use proxy provider. If you want to expose change notifier, you have to use change notifier proxy provider. Right, cool. And if I'm not mistaken, it is a good time to step away for a moment and do a short recap of all of the things that we've covered for today. So today we've covered future in order to be able to interact properly with all of the asynchronous persistent storages. Then we've covered most of the available for us persistent storage options. And then we've planned ahead how we are going to go with integration between our persistent storage and Flutter application. And it is the thing, it is basically everything we need in order to start our follow-along coding session where we are going together with you integrate SQLite database into our application. And so what about our time? We have like 30 minutes, which is completely fine. So guys, I think let me address some of your questions before we move forward. So because I remember there were some questions. Let me scroll just to the top. It will take some time. Okay, first question, how to clean shared preferences when we delete an application? Well, honestly speaking, I have no idea. I don't even know whether we have some API in Flutter like this. I mean, I don't even know that we are able to perform some handling of application deletion just from application side, if I got this question correctly. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't address this right now, but maybe I can think about it later. Cool. Let me take a look at some other questions. No SQL. So when we want to use proxy provider, also need to use provider. Vadim, may I kindly ask you to elaborate a little bit? What does it mean? Maybe I should show some example in order to kind of capture it better. Okay, let me do this quickly. This one? Cool. And the question is? Okay. So just it depends on your intention or like what do you want to provide. So you might want to provide just some value and nothing else. And this value is like is sort of it does not depend on anything. So why we use create method the same? Okay. Is it clear for now? So the thing is that we use provider to expose some value which is not dependent, and then we have to use proxy provider for some value which is dependent on storage config, like in our case, like storage service, and it depends on storage config. And that is the reason why we have to use proxy provider for providing storage service specifically. Cool, cool. Yeah, okay. Sorry about this. I got it. Okay, let's take a look at other questions. Any example of NoSQL like sqlite? Unfortunately, I don't know for sure, but it's probably worth taking a look into Dart or Flutter package registry. Yeah, cool. We can probably even do this a little bit later on, but I think some storage should exist for use cases like this. And there were some questions regarding state management. Actually, provider concepts are used for the state management. Yeah. And the thing is that provider actually is a recommended solution by Flutter team for performing state management. We covered this thing on previous session. It was a little bit contrived and complicated, but yeah. Blog. I've heard about it. I've never used it, unfortunately, but as far as I know, it should be good. I mean, because I've heard a lot of rumors and mentions of this library. It should be like worth checking, I think, as for instance, as a next step of learning Flutter. Oh my, we've got more questions. Block is recommended. Let me check this. Okay, sounds interesting. Provider might be simpler. Well, that's unfortunately I haven't checked block, but now I understand that I should check it for sure. What is your opinion on React Native versus Flutter? What would you choose and why? This question is tricky because like I have not used React Native in that extensive in order to be able to build some comparison. I've tried to build once some homemade application with React Native. My experience was painful, but I anyway don't feel confident just saying that Flutter is better. Flutter outperforms React Native. I just can't say that. It is simply unfair. But as from my experience, Flutter works. My Flutter journey was way smoother compared to React Native. So with React Native, it was like tons of pain, to be honest. Camera API in Flutter a couple of months ago. No, I don't know any specifics regarding this topic about camera API or regarding any other low-level API. Oh, God, I guess I'm so bad. I know nothing. That's a shame. No, guys, unfortunately, I know. Do you have experience with Flutter Web? Can it be used in production? Or it depends on your risks, because if I'm not mistaken, Flutter Web is currently in beta. At least it was when I checked it for the last time. Another thing that I don't know about interoperability with some sort of existing web solutions. Probably there is no interoperability at all because they are written in JavaScript and Flutter applications is written in Dart. But yeah. So can't say for sure. I would probably play safe and don't use it for now. Adaptive app layout. That's a good question. We've got so many questions. That's cool. Okay, adaptive app layout. This thing is unfortunately out of scope of our workshop, both of the episodes. However, just be patient. Right in the end, I'm going to share the list of guidance and topics for for like where to go next up to this point, which topics to discover next. And I'm going to present adaptive app layout as well. But you can partially cover this topic by referring to the record of our previous event. It was covered really barely, but anyway, at least to some extent. Cool questions. You can use media queries. Yeah, there is an API like this. Can't say a lot about it, but there is. So another question that I missed. As far as I know, Flutter supports desktop right now. What do you think about it? Sounds cool. Sounds cool. I mean, it's a great idea to have a single code base for all of the platforms, but unfortunately, I don't know how well it works for now. So it would be great to try it out for sure. Yeah, guys, do we have more questions? Let me just take a look. Do providers have to be declared at the root of the tree? No. I think that the best practice here is to define your providers. Like here we've defined it in the root just for the sake of complexity and for the sake of, I don't know, creating some sort of similarities between our traditional web UI and Flutter applications. But I think the best practice here is to put your providers not on the root, but as close as possible to actually to the widget which is going to consume this data, just in order to sort of let me just think about it. Just in order to avoid some data collisions, in order to avoid some performance degradation introduced by unnecessary re-renders when like widgets can be rendered because of changes occurred in some data, but this widget might actually don't care a lot about this data at all, and this could be a problem. So there is no obligation regarding where can you define your provider, but probably for the first time, it probably would be a good idea to place it at the root, but later you may fine-tune its position a little bit to place it closer to the source, to the consumers of this data. Sorry. Let me check some other questions. Integration test in Flutter. That's a weird experience. Yeah, the only thing I remember about writing tests for Flutter application is that it was really weird to use text values as allocators for your widgets. I don't know, have they made some progress so far regarding this? So like, have they managed to build some other allocator strategies? And now it makes sense because we don't have CSS. We can't build our allocator strategy based on like some selectors or things like that. But anyway, for me, it was weird just to like navigate across my UI by button text or list text, things like that. So that was kind of painful experience, I should say. Maybe at least it should be possible to access. Very limited. Yeah, it seems like it hasn't changed a lot since then. Okay, then cool. So we've got 6 minutes. Let me quickly take a look at other questions. Maybe I've missed something. Opinion providers. No, I think I've covered basically everything. Thanks everyone, guys, for your participation. Thanks for your questions. And I think we are ready to move forward with our follow along coding session. Yeah, thank you. You are cool. Right, so, okay. Then I would like you to open up your IDE, open up our repo and check out to the branch called task-05-persistence, which is going to act as our boilerplate for our follow along coding session. Just put the plus sign when you are ready with it. I will open up my IDE at the same time. I'm waiting for the pluses. Okay. So guys, let me know when we will be ready to start, because like I want to do it almost in simultaneous fashion together with you in order to not to lose you along the way and to make your experience as smooth as possible. We've got at least one plus. Cool. Gotta go. Sorry about that. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for participation. Thanks. Take care and stay safe. Okay, or maybe one more. We've got 20 minutes. It's fine. Okay, never mind. So before we start, I would like to. How do you use global case during the build? Oh, this is the question where I have to just to kind of Google what is global keys. Unfortunately, that's a shame for me. I suppose that I don't use it at all, unfortunately, which might be bad, but okay. Let me just write it down in order to not forget to use it later. Okay, nice. Coding session. Can you guys see my screen? I hope that yes. And let's keep going. So our plan for now is to introduce persistent storage to our application with help of third-party package called sqlite, which allows us to integrate some SQLite database into our application. And how do you guys think, what should be the first step in implementing our solution? Just how do you guys think? Model class. Just to focus on the word third-party package. This is the clue. Yeah, correctly. This is exactly the answer. So we need to add this package to our dependencies. And for this, let's open our pub/spec, which is the file which is responsible for filling dependencies for our Flutter application. And the only thing I need to do is to simply type ASCII-Lite here as a dependency. And luckily, my IDE, my text editor, is going to grab this dependency automatically via Flutter plugin, which is great. Cool, it seems to be done. The next thing to do is to actually do a little bit of planning of how we are going to actually model our storage, to integrate it, and things like that. So we already got some structure which we are going to use, which we are going to store, which is Word, which is located in word.dart file. And as you can see here, it is pretty straightforward. It consists only of 3 fields, which is ID, text, and usage count. It features some simple domain logic for increasing usage count. And additionally to that, it is possible to convert this word for some representation, which is consumable by our storage, and do the opposite transformation to create some word out of our database-friendly view. Right. So the thing that I would like to do next is to introduce. Would it be better to have exact version in depth list? Probably it would be better, but for now, for the sake of tutorial, I would like to kind of not to focus on this, just to kind of continue focusing on integrating our storage. And what I was talking about, at the next stage, I would like to introduce some abstraction for our storage. And let us take a look at this. So I'm going to create a new file, which I'm going to call just as simple as words storage, just like this. And the thing I'm trying to achieve with introducing such level of abstraction is to allow my application to abstract away from the way how I'm going to actually store my words, because it is pretty common for our business requirements to be changed. So today we want to store our words inside SQLite database, but tomorrow we are going to urgently migrate to some remote server via HTTP. And I would like my application code to depend only on abstraction, which is going to solve some pretty abstract task, just store some words. I don't want my application to care a lot about how the storage is going to be performed, like via HTTP or via SQLite, things like that. So this is the reason for this abstraction to exist. And so to build this abstraction, I have to use abstract class, because in Dart we have no interfaces for sure. And this class is going to be called words storage, right? Yeah, cool. And now we need to define a contract for our abstraction. So for sure, I know that I'm going to need some words to retrieve from my storage. I'm going to need some capability for inserting my words. And I will need to update some existing word, for instance. Let's brush up our signatures a little bit. So I know for sure that all of these methods will work asynchronously. So this is the reason why we need to define them as a method which are going to return futures. So getWords is going to return list of words, right? And I need to import it, I guess. Yeah, right. Insert is going to return. So for now, let's assume that it is going to return just integer as an ID of newly created word. It is going to accept some string, which is text of our newly added word. And last but not least is a procedure for updating our word, which is going to return future, which resolves to nothing, and it accepts just existing word. And this is it with our abstraction. Looks fine for me, at least at this stage. And next, I would like to think a little bit about the way we are going to actually store our data. And as we agreed, we are going to store it inside SQLite database. And this means that we have to care about creation of our SQL database as well. Let's create a separate file, which is called setup database. This file is going to consist of only one function, which is going to return yet another future, since this procedure is asynchronous. And this future will be resolved with our database object. Let's call it like this, setup database, right? Again, let's add all of the missing imports. Is it possible? Cool. Yes, and we need to do exactly the same thing that we've done on our slides. We need to call a method called open database, which is going to accept our database path. Let's fill it. So what we need to do, we need to define our db path variable, which is going to be composed with the Dart join method. And it is going to accept some get database path and our database name, which is going to be like active vocabulary DB. So something wrong with join. Should I import something? Oh God. Is not join. Let me take a look at the slides quickly. I was pretty much confused with all of these imports and things like that. So join, where should I get you? To which API you belongs? Okay, never mind. So in this case, let me open up my reference solution. It is here. Let me take a look at my setup database. Okay, there is a package called path, and apparently we need to import it explicitly as well. Okay, cool. And what about you? Get database. And what's wrong with you? Yeah, it returns future, which basically means that I need to await for it. And since I'm using await here, I should define this function as a synchronous one. Cool. Do we have some question? Sorry. Yeah, let me provide the link. It was declared some messages ago. Let me just find it quickly for you. Oh God. Okay, sorry for this. Let me just do this quickly. So here is the link for GitHub. Here you can clone your repo and check out to a branch called task05 persistence, right? Cool, cool. Let's keep going with our follow along. So where we left off, we've defined database path for our database. We've opened our database, but now we need to define our creation logic. So let's define onCreate callback, which is going to accept database and version. And here we are going to, let me fix that. We are going to execute some initial query for creating our database. So what we need to do, we need to do db execute, and we have to write some SQL. For sure, I don't want to leave my SQL. That is the reason why I've got some helper class, which is SQL query helper. And I can call get query. And as a query, I'm going to use SQL query create words table. This is it. So what we've got here, support migration from start. Yeah, it might be better. I mean, if you feel confident with that, for sure you can go for it. But I mean, I just want to emphasize that it might be difficult for everyone to implement all of the complicated scenarios from the start. And this is the reason why for now we try to streamline things as much as possible, just to kind of make the first experience not that painful for everyone. Yeah, but a good point for sure. Yeah, cool. And so far, we've got our storage abstraction here. We've got our database setup logic here. And now I think it is time to actually define our storage implementation we are going to use. Actually, our implementation, which is concerned regarding SQLite storage. And I'm going to call it like local DB words storage, right? This is the thing. And it is going to be like this, just local DB words storage. And we should extend our abstraction defined before. This abstraction is words storage. So now it complains and it totally makes sense. Let's please. Okay, let's define our overrides. Here it goes. For now, just throw some meaningless exception, but for now it's fine. And now, so since this is the storage which is responsible for this low-level interaction with SQLite database, for sure, I imply that it should have access to this storage. And I think that it will live simply as a class instance field, which we are going to provide later. Again, let's import some missing imports. And let's assume that this database will be delivered to our storage via constructor injection. That's why we have to define our constructor, which is local DB word storage, and it accepts our database. And this is the fancy way how can we define just a constructor with named arguments. Cool. So at this point, we assume that we have got our database inside somehow. It is not clear for now how, but we will see it in future. And now let's just simply walk step by step over these methods and try to implement them in order to make it work. So let's start with the get words. And as you remember, we should use query method of our database. We shouldn't use const, we should use final. And let's call it like match results, right? And for querying our data, we should use db.query method, where we have to define our table. I don't really remember how it is called. It is called words camel cased. Okay, cool. So we, oh God, can I just, okay, nice. Yeah, table called words. Great, and we should remember that actually we are going to have here a list of maps. And now we have to convert this list of maps into actual list of words. And for doing this, we have to do things like that. We have to use match results. Since this is a list, we can work with some iteration methods, like, I guess, no, we can't. It's the future. Sorry. Again, my bad. Yeah, it is the future. This function should be async, and we should actually wait for our match results. And from this point, we are able to work with this as with array. And we can call it method called map. And here, let's call it something fancy like match result, I don't know. And we can just directly call a word constructor, which we've defined, which is called from map, and it simply accepts some map. And this is it with our get words implementation. Pretty simple. And all of other methods are more or less simple at the same way. So let's say for updating words, it is for sure pretty straightforward. The only thing we need to do, we need to just call a corresponding method, which is called update, which again accepts some table name. And just a map we are going to use. And for this reason, we're going to use a ready-made conversion method to convert our word into a map of values. And the last but not least is the insertion of our words. This might be a little bit more complicated. So we accept good workshop, but I have to go. Sorry for that. Sorry. So anyway, stay safe and take care. And for us, let's just try to finish with that. So we need to create new word at first, since we have only text string. So let's create new word at first, which is simple as word. And then we can put this right into a database. And as you remember, to do this, we again have to call a corresponding method of the database object, which is insert. And let's do it. So we need to do await db insert. And again, we should use proper table name and the map of values we would like to use. So this is new word to map. Right, and the thing is that we agreed in our contract that we are going to return some ID of newly created word. Right, and to do this, we actually can grab the same ID which is returned from db insert, which actually returns ID of newly created record, which means that the whole thing we can do is to simply do return db insert. Nice, and this is it with the implementation of our storage. Pretty simple, just delegate all the responsibility to the corresponding methods of database object. And the final piece of the puzzle we need to use in order to complete all of these things is to perform this integration with the help of provider package. Let's go to our root component, and this is how our provider tree is looking right now. And as you can guess, for now, we need to provide two more values to our widgets tree. First one is our database object, and another one is our storage, which is supposed to be used within our application model, right? And let's try to do this step by step. So first of all, let's try to actually we need to provide only storage, and let's try to do this. So the thing is that initialization of our storage is an asynchronous procedure, and this is the reason why we have to use future provider for this. Now we are going to see why. So we are using future provider, then we define create method, and inside we can define our asynchronous procedure of the definition of our provider. It's going to return some word storage. Pay close attention to the fact that I'm using here abstraction instead of some particular implementation, which is local DB storage. Yes, and yeah, let's move forward with this. So in order to set up our local DB storage, we have to set up our database first. And let's do this. So basically, let's define a new variable called DB and call our setup database script, which is going to work like this. And now we are freely able to create our local DB storage instance with the help of this DB variable. So what we need to do is to call our local DB word storage constructor and provide DB here, just as we defined. So it complains for some reason, create must not be null. Maybe something is missing. Yeah, okay, that's good. This method is obliged to accept some context, which we don't care a lot about, but we have to provide it anyway. So this is the procedure of our initialization. We simply have to fix this declaration. And this is it. This is the way how we are going to provide our storage to our tree. we've set up our database using script defined before, and we injected this database right inside our local DB word storage. And now the only thing we have to do is to inject this storage into our words provider, which handles all of the state of our application, which looks like this. And before do that, let's prepare everything required on the side of our change notifier. So the thing we have to do, we have to provide some way to inject this provider. And we're going to do this via setter injection. And there will be a method called setStorage, which is going to accept some abstract word storage. Again, I emphasize that this is an abstraction, and it should have the same instance field. Right, and here we are going to accept the storage by doing things like this, simply setting it, and we're going to return this because of our signature. Cool, this is it. And now we can go back to our integration piece. And as I mentioned during this presentation, if we want to build some provider based on some other provider, we have to use proxy provider. And at the same time, if our proxy provider actually returns change notifier, we have to use kind of mix of both worlds. Change notifier, proxy change notifier provider. So let's move towards it. What I need to do is to simply define this as a change notifier proxy provider, right. And we need to change the signature a little bit. So first of all, we should provide all of the required type arguments. First of all, we should provide type argument for dependency, which is word storage. And then to the value we are going to build, which is our words provider. And now we already defined some create callback to perform some instantiation of our storage, of our provider, sorry. And then we need to define an update callback, which is going to be responsible for injecting our, can you please tell me? Context, if I'm not mistaken, it accepts word storage as a second argument and words provider as a third one. And we need to perform this setter injection that we've implemented on words provider side. And we need to do words provider set storage to our word storage, right? And this is the thing. This procedure is a little bit contrived and complicated, but this is it with the integration and plugging in of our storage responsible class into our application model. And the really final piece of this big picture is to actually start reflecting changes in our application model within some persistent storage. And this should not be super tricky. The only thing we need to do is to simply call the corresponding methods of our storage within these methods for handling some application-wide state changes. So let's take a look at the logic for adding new words. So as you can see here, we added word to our application model, but now on top of that, we have to add the same word to our persistent storage. So first of all, as usual, we have to define this as a synchronous function since we are going to operate on asynchronous storage. And we've defined our word. We are going to store our word first inside our persistent storage. And we're going to grab its ID additionally in order to set it later. And to do this, we can do await storage. Right, insert word. It accepts text. Right. A little bit messed up with this, but anyway. Okay, never mind. So basically, text. We are going to insert new word. We are going to grab its newly created legal ID. Then we are going to populate our existing word ID with this database friendly word ID. And then we are going to perform corresponding changes to our application model by inserting our new word into words array. And then we are going to simply run notify listeners to propagate our changes to the widgets tree. And this is it. This is the most complex part. And for tracking word usage, it is even more simpler. The only thing we need to do, again, is to define this function as a synchronous one, do all the keyword thing, and update our word inside our persistent storage. So we need to do storage, update word, and the word we would like to update. And this is it. Yeah, and the thing is that we are almost done with this integration, and let's simply try to run this application. So for this, let's just try run and debug, select our emulator, and let's take a look what will happen. Yeah, for sure, all of the recordings will be shared pretty shortly. Let's just finish with this follow along session, and all of the links will be available for you. Cool, so does it work? Let me open up my console. Seems okay so far. It is working. Something's happening. Oh. Okay, as you can see, I've got an exception. I've got an exception that I did not provide my version argument when I was working on setting up my database. Let's try to fix that. So I don't care about version really, but let's just provide one as a version. Let's take a look at it one more time. Now seems to be working fine. So it's still empty, which is reasonable. Let's try to add. Well, it doesn't work for some reason. Let's try to rerun it. So something going on. Okay, never mind. Taking into account our time bugs, I will simply say that for now it is not enough, because as you can see here, we wired up our storage into like adding new words and tracking words usage. However, we are still getting our words simply from our application model. And the thing is that we still have no step to synchronize our persistent storage, which lies within this storage field, and these words field inside words provider. And I have not really found a good solution for this, but at least I found something possible at this point. And we can do this integration at this moment when we receive our storage, actually. And so the thing is that we need to just run logic for fetching our words. So what we need to do, we need to call this .storage, and we need to execute the corresponding method for getting our words. And we can even use here a callback API just in order to kind of download our words later and then propagate changes to our model. And what we need to do, we need to handle success with then callback, and then we need to do two things. We need to set our words to the words from persistent storage, and we need to notify our listeners in order to let our changes to be propagated. Yeah, that's correct. So it should not be final for sure. Okay, cool. And here is another thing to consider. I think my emulator stuck for some reason. Let me just kill it. So, nice. Okay, cool. So the thing is that, as you can see in my code, I always act as if my storage will always be available. However, it is not fair. So the thing is that for some time across the life cycle of my application, there will be a time when my words provider will exist without any storage attached, which effectively means that sometimes my storage will be null. And as you can guess, this will lead to an exception thrown here, here, and in all of the other places where I use storage or where I use it directly. And this is the reason why I have to provide some sort of guard against it everywhere. So it means that I have to put a bunch of ifs here and there. So basically, if my storage is not null, I'm ready to do things like that. This is probably not a brilliant solution, but at least it makes things possible to some extent. And let's assume that we don't want to do a thing if our storage is null. So basically, if our storage is null, we are going to simply return and forget about it. And the same thing we are going to do here. Right. This is it. And if I'm not mistaken, at this point, we should be pretty much set to finally work with our persistent storage. Let me try to run our application one more time. You can write get and don't put million ifs in app or do nullable class. Yeah, that's good. That's good. My bad that I have not thought about it. But anyway, thanks. Okay, so what about my application? I hope it's running. Yeah, there is another exception because on previous session, I tried to put more emphasis on this, that unlike in JavaScript, unfortunately, map method of list does not return actual list. It returns some sort of iterable object, which should be implicitly converted into list, unfortunately. Or maybe not even unfortunately, but this is the thing which is pretty easy to be missed. Yeah, and now it should work. Yeah, and this will be it. We've got only 7 survivors of us, but or maybe even 6. Anyway, this is fine for me. Okay, let's take a look at our application finally. Wow, it has even captured my previous storage. Yeah, so basically, this is the idea. We have our application up and running. We've got some words even from the storage that had been created before. So we can still track our usage. I hope so, right? Unique constraint failed. Blah, 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 blah. I messed something with my local DB storage, so let's take a look what I'm doing. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, because I need to specify my where condition where I update things. So ID, just go to question mark and where args, right? Should I restart it? Or maybe I'm missing something. Why is it complaining about constraints? I think I got it. Yeah, guys, I got it. Yeah, sorry for this. Let me just terminate everything. I got what's happening. because I've tried to use an existing database, but I should use a new one. Let me just run a new emulator like this, for instance. We are out of our time anyway, but sorry about this. Okay, let's anyway finish it. We are almost on the finish line. It's like just the final touch we need to make. And we are still waiting. Okay, we have got our application. I hope it's interactive. Cool. Let's try to add a couple of words to our dictionary. As again, my favorite word is taciturn. Like peril. And what else? Dejected, let's say that. Cool, we've got dictionary. Let's go try to practice some of them. So let's assume that I'm trying to use peril 3 times, taciturn 1 time, and dejected 2 times. And then I'm going to just close my application. Right. And now let's try to come back to it shortly. Oh no, it's the wrong application. Yeah, here's the thing. All of our data have been persistently stored into our sqlite database instance, and we can still track our data, close our application, go back to it, and continue practicing in order to expand our active vocabulary. And this is it. This is it with our database integration. This is it with our follow along coding section, and we can just move forward. So again, survivors, I'm calling to you. Have you managed to do the same, or maybe you magic? Maxim, have you managed to do it by your own? Are you magician or not? That is the question. No. Well, that's sad. That's sad. Okay, anyway, never mind. Anyway, I hope that even if you watch this in record, you will be able to achieve the same objective for sure. Yeah, this will be available. Cool. Let's go back to our presentation. This is it with our practice section for today. You can freely close your IDE, close all of the programmer tools that you might have. And we have come to our encore, actually. So where we have to say farewell for each other. But before we do that, let's just come up with the right conclusion. Again, let's probably create some huge, comprehensive recap of all of our workshop sessions dedicated to Flutter. So as a developers, we've learned to do actually a lot of different things. So in previous session, we learned how to build a simple Flutter application, which can handle various forms of user interaction, such as handling inputs. It can encompass multiple different screens and organize switching between them via routing. They can also look pretty just because we have found out how to use Flutter styling solution. And at the same time, we know how to organize some complicated logic to some extent, which requires to use shared state management. And as a result of today's session in particular, we've also discovered how to store our data persistently on some local device storage. And it is a good question for now where to go next if I want to expand my Flutter knowledge, if I want to dive deeper into the topic and become even more familiar with this than I am, which is completely possible. So, as usual, the best source of information regarding Flutter is Flutter documentation, which is Flutter docs link. You can find more about persistence in a dedicated persistence cookbook to find more recipes and storage tricks. And I recommend highly to work with one particular guide, which is Firebase integration guide, which will not only learn you how to which will not only teach you how to work with some third-party storage package, but also will show you some examples on how to work with truly reactive storage in real time, which is also great. And another thing is the full documentation for Future API, just to cover more built-in goodies to work with this. More on provider package, just to discover all of the provider intentions, use cases, and more API, and links to all of the packages that we have been using for today. This is it with reference links. And the final thing is a more broader set of topics, which is tailored directly to expand your expertise as a Flutter developer. So as I mentioned before, there is a dedicated section in Flutter documentation fully devoted to building truly responsive layouts in Flutter. It features some complicated concepts such as box constraints and layout builders. We haven't covered this during this session, unfortunately, but anyway, this is now a topic for you to discover at your own pace. It is also worth checking a forms cookbook just to find a way how to build complex forms with validation messages, inputs, labels, and things like that. Stream is also a great thing, which is basically the unit of reactive work, which is like, observable from RxJS or any other Rx-tailed library, like RxJava, for instance. And the corresponding widgets, which allow you to build your widget tree right from this unit of asynchronous work, such as Future, which is Future Builder, and Stream Builder, which you can use to build your widget tree out of plain Dart stream. And another link is the Navigator 2.0, which is a new and shiny solution for performing navigation in Flutter application. It is great, straightforward, and nice, but unfortunately, this introductional article contains more content that I've prepared for both of these workshops simultaneously. I mean, that in total. So it's pretty low level, but it's cool. And it's primarily intended only for library developers who are going to, I believe, who are going to deliver sooner or later some great routing library, much better than the Flutter has. And we've done with everything with this part of my life and this workshop and all of these events. So this is the last time when you are able to ask any questions or to say anything that you would like to say for this workshop. I'm just waiting one last time for the chat, maybe to some comments. Do you guys have anything to say? Thanks a lot. Yeah, you're welcome. We've got 5 of us. Cool. Okay, kisses, shutouts, and things like that. Cool, cool. Okay, then thanks everyone again for staying tuned. We again failed to cram everything into 90 minutes, but I think we've done a great progress in this area. Okay, anyway, I'm not going to take your time more. Thanks everyone for, again, being part of it, for staying together with me. Thank you for your interest and good luck on your further journey on this path to learn Flutter. Stay tuned, stay connected. Feel free to reach me out directly whenever you like. And good luck, stay safe, and bye-bye. Farewell.